Welcome to Intellectuals with Qasim. In this video, we will discuss book summary of 40 Rules of Love, written by Elif Shafak. The 40 Rules of Love is a dual narrative novel that weaves together two love stories set 8 centuries apart. One unfolds in 13th century Anatolia, following the legendary Sufi poet Rumi and his transformative friendship with the wandering mystic Shams of Tabriz. The other takes place in present-day Massachusetts, the USA, where Ella Rubinstein, a dissatisfied housewife, reads a manuscript about Rumi's life, and in doing so, discovers her own hunger for love, meaning, and spiritual awakening. Let's begin the story of Rumi and Shams of Tabriz. Who were they, and why their story is important for us? Jalal ad-Din Rumi was, in 1244, the most respected Islamic scholar and preacher in all of Konya. He had a large household, his wife Kara, sons Sultan Walad and Aladdin, and young ward Kimia, devoted students, admiring rulers, and packed Friday sermons. From the outside, his life was perfect, but from within, Rumi was incomplete. He was a scholar of God, not a lover of God. His faith was formal, his prayers were correct in form, but hollow at their center. He was like the reed flute before it is cut, silent, unmoved, unbroken. He had a recurring dream he could not understand, searching for someone in a distant city, sitting by a well in his own courtyard with a lantern, weeping. That dream was pointing him toward Shams.
Shams of Tabriz was a wandering Sufi dervish from Tabriz, Persia. From childhood, he was different from everyone around him, restless, spiritually intense, and deeply lonely. He rejected settled life, formal religion, and empty ritual. He believed God was not confined to mosques or books, but lived inside every human heart, and that the only true path to God was through love. For years, he wandered the Islamic world, Baghdad, Tabriz, and beyond, sleeping in caravanseries, owning nothing, searching for a spiritual equal. His Sufi master, Baba Zaman in Baghdad, recognized that Shams had a fire beyond what he himself could contain, and told him honestly that his true companion was out there waiting. Shams prayed to God for this companion for years. Finally, guided by a vision, he set off for Konya, with no guarantee, no plan, only a burning inner certainty that the person he was searching for was there.
So their first meeting was on October 1244. Shams arrived in Konya quietly, staying at a simple inn near the sugar vendors. He gathered information about Rumi from the streets before approaching him, so he could see him with fresh eyes, not through others' opinions. Their first encounter was explosive. Shams approached Rumi. Some versions say he knocked the books from his hand and posed a question that no conventional scholar could answer. He asked Rumi to choose between the Prophet Muhammad and a great Sufi mystic, challenging him to go beyond the surface of scholarship and into the living experience of divine love. The question broke something open in Rumi. He looked at this rough, wild, socially nobody dervish and understood in an instant that he was standing before someone who lived what Rumi had only theorized about. From that very day, they retreated into Rumi's private room and shut the door. For 40 days, students, family, and the entire city waited outside. Nobody heard what passed between them. When Rumi emerged, he was a different man entirely.
Rumi's transformation. After the 40 days, Rumi was reborn. Ecstatic poetry began pouring out of him unstoppably, verse he could not plan or stop. Dictated to his students, becoming the Masnavi, one of the greatest works of world literature. He danced the Sema, the whirling dervish ceremony. He visited taverns. He embraced people across all social boundaries. He treated a harlot, a Christian woman, a beggar, and a drunkard with the same dignity as a nobleman. Everything Shams did was deliberate. He threw Rumi's books into the water. He sent him to beg in the street in front of his own mosque. He cut him off from his admirers and his elite social circle, forcing him down to the level of ordinary humanity. Shams knew that before a man can truly love God, he must be stripped of everything he uses as a substitute for God. his reputation, his learning, his social position, his security. Rumi understood this later and says himself that through Shams he learned the value of madness, helplessness, loneliness, and finally heartbreak, and that each was a step closer to the divine.
On the other hand, whole Konya, currently Turkey, against them. The outside world could not tolerate what it witnessed. Several forces rose against the friendship. First, disappearance. The hostility became unbearable. Shams departed suddenly for Damascus without warning. Rumi collapsed into grief. He stopped eating properly, abandoned his lessons, and could not function. Rumi's son, Sultan Walad, traveled to Damascus himself to find Shams and beg him to return. Shams agreed out of love for Rumi and came back to Konya. The reunion was joyful and creative. Together, they launched the first public Sema performance, the sacred whirling dance, which Shams had helped design as a ceremony of ego death and divine surrender. It was beautiful and even moved hostile onlookers. For a brief while, calm seemed possible. Then, on March 1248, Sham assassinated by a group of people, including Rumi's own son involved in the assassination.
The meaning of their story, Rumi and Shams together demonstrate the novel's central argument that the highest love destroys the self, scandalizes the world, and produces something that could not have existed without it. Their friendship had no name that ordinary society recognized. The world tried to extinguish it through jealousy, hatred, and murder. It could not. Shams gave Rumi fire. Rumi gave Shams immortality. 8 centuries later, Rumi's poetry is still read by millions across every religion and culture, and every poem carries the name of Shams of Tabriz. Now I will explain second part of the story. Basically, Elif Shafak described gorgeously second part of the story. The modern story, Ella Rubinstein. Ella Rubinstein is a 40-year-old housewife living in Northampton, Massachusetts. She has a large, comfortable home, a successful dentist husband named David, 3 children, Jeanette, Orly, and Avi, and a life that looks ideal from the outside but feels hollow within. Ella's a woman who has spent 20 years suppressing her own desires, making herself indispensable to others, and never confronting the question of whether she is happy. She's like still water, monotonous and predictable. She takes a part-time job reading manuscripts for a literary agency. Her first assignment is to evaluate a novel called Sweet Blasphemy, written by Azizi Zahara, a Dutch-Moroccan Sufi mystic living in Amsterdam who is dying of cancer. The novel tells the story of Rumi and Shams of Tabriz. As Ella reads the manuscript, she begins an email correspondence with Aziz. He writes to her with warmth, wisdom, and spiritual depth. He speaks of love without boundaries, of the 40 rules, of the universe turning differently when fire loves water. Ella finds herself falling into something she has never experienced. Not romantic love exactly at first, but an awakening. She starts to feel, perhaps for the first time, that she deserves more from life than duty. Meanwhile, her personal life unravels. She discovers that her husband David is having an affair, her eldest daughter Jeanette is controlling and critical, Orly, the middle child, is emotionally withdrawn, her son Avi is cheerful but detached. The family lives side by side, but nobody truly sees anyone else. Ella begins to understand that she has been the scaffolding of a life, holding everything up while remaining invisible at its center.
Through her growing correspondence with Aziz, and through the story of Rumi and Shams she is reading, Ella finds the courage to confront her truth. She asks for a separation from David. She tells him that she wants to leave. Not for Aziz exactly, but for herself. And in the novel's final act, she travels to Amsterdam to be with Aziz. She knows he is dying. She chooses love anyway. Impermanent, uncertain, real love over the security of a life she no longer believes in. She arrives in Amsterdam as Aziz's health is failing, and they spend his final days together.
The novel ends with Ella alone, but free, looking out at the sky, transformed. The deeper message. But this book is not just a historical novel. Elif Shafak is saying something much deeper. She is telling us that the search for love, real love, divine love, is timeless. Whether you are a housewife in Massachusetts in 2008 or a poet in Konya in 1244, the human soul asks the same questions. Why am I here? Who am I without the rules? 40 rules that Shams teaches are not just for Rumi. They are for every single one of us.